Welcome to your awakening. Please take all as your reality is adjusted.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings, salutations, well met, fellow hail. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Feedback. At least I know the stream is actually working. Now I can see the chat room. Yes, welcome back once again. Another edition of Sol Excalibre. Just gone 8 p.m. I was rushing to make myself a fresh coffee before we got started. So a minute or two after the hour, but we're still risen like the sun, like Ingsoc rising, like the moon of reflection. All right, but in a moment, I'm going to subject you to some loud music, if I can make it work. Swap the screen share for a different screen share, include the audio, and mute myself for a moment. Watch the lyrics on the screen in particular.
Our population in deep denial, contagion release,
That'll do. Just like 10 seconds worth. This is fair use for comment and critique and academic study and debate and discourse about this particular song and the video that goes along with it, which you can see on the screen at the moment. And I will come back to it and explain why I am bringing this up at the moment. I will put the link in the chat box on the side of the stream, multitasking, and hopefully that will come through. It is a bit loud and heavy. If you're not into loud and heavy music, it is heavy metal. You might, not necessarily be into that kind of thing, but I'm more interested in the contents of it and a few other connections, one of which you can currently see on the screen, but I won't mention it just yet, but we'll come back to it at some point in a bit, because that's part of what I wanted to talk about tonight. Right, we can stop that particular screen share for a moment. I'll come back to it. But first of all, to get into, like I've got into the habit of doing, this week's subtitle or title and why I'm pointing at these particular things, I'm trying to raise this kind of point of view. In the title this week, I put the one world enemy and technosoma. Not necessarily connected together. They are intrinsically, in many ways, the two go hand in hand. But correlation does not necessarily equal causation, which is another point that I will come back to in a short while. I'll try and get into this, and then we can get back to those points as quick as possible, because I'm already a bit late in my usual fashion. Rambling away. Hello to everyone in the chat room. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Manus Moore and Lynn Anderson. Hello. I think there's a lot going on at the moment, so I'll not be surprised if there's not as many people around as there often is, or usually is anyway. I know there's a lot of people putting out content now, especially at the moment when there's so many of us that are being told to stay at home. Therefore, we got more time to spend creating content and outputting content. And for some people, it may now be the only opportunity for work, for business, to earn money. And there's a lot of people that are now suddenly jumping on the bandwagon, as it were, climbing on board the digital, virtual e-commerce of creating content in exchange for monetary return of some kind of financial return. You know, the kind of setup, the way the business model works now. You have a social media platform, multiple, you know, people will be on like several different social media platforms, Instagram and Fartard and whatever. That's my sort of conglomeration of Facebook and Twigger, Fartard. But there you go. I know what I mean. Yeah, so there's a lot more people jumping on that bandwagon. So the amount of content and the amount of stuff going out is part of the wave. I know Jeff C's been talking about this a lot recently, and I can see what he's pointing at, the subtle inclusion of talking of waves that has been built up for a long time now. And now some of those waves are starting to crash, and the tide isn't really giving up. So after they've hit you with one, not too long after, there's something else, and then there's something else, and then there's something else. And just like the sea does, it wears things down. I thought about titling this week's episode The Weekly Quiz Show, because it seems to be now that a lot of what's going on out there is a quiz show, as in, what bit of information do you see? Does it add up to anything? Is this the answer? It's a little bit like Jeopardy, you know, where they give you the answer and you have to figure out the question. They're presenting us with all this information, supposedly about what's going on, and also supposedly about what they're going to do about it. But what are the actual results of that? Yeah, that's the question, or the answer. And the question is, can you figure out the answer? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going down, so I'm going to attempt to surf some of it and mention some of the things that have stood out to me, and whether this is another example of where this is progressing. If you can see the stepping stones, if you can see the destination, you can figure out the pathway as you go. And then things that they do, yes, the ubiquitous they, don't come as a surprise. They don't catch you off guard. They don't make you reactive, like, oh, I never thought they'd do that. Because if you can see where they're trying to get us to, then the pathway to get there starts to reveal itself. You know, they don't have to admit what they're doing. It's just obvious because they go in that direction. You know, they keep saying they're not trying to make it, you know, over the top. They're not trying to control us all, but that's exactly where they're walking. So if they head in that direction, it doesn't really matter what they say. You can see that they're heading that direction. Maybe I'm over-explaining that analogy. But anyway, hello in the chat room, New Being. Thanks for joining us. And Safety Man, hello. And Tazzy's in the room. I know Tazzy will be dropping links as we go. But I've left her in a situation of doing it on the fly because I didn't give her any advance notice of what I'm talking about. But that's part of the fun, isn't it? Figuring out what the hell is he on about this week. So yes, the one world enemy and the technosoma. One world enemy. I hope that that's pretty obvious to most people. This is for real, y'all. This is for real, y'all. That's going to become such a meme for this situation. It really is. The media is saturating us with information about how dangerous this situation is. Situation, everybody say situation. How dangerous the virus is, allegedly. and how all the things that they're doing at the moment are justified because it's so dangerous for you to be carrying on life normal as we knew it. Therefore, you've got to stay at home, you've got to agree to follow these new rules, etc., because the virus is just so dangerous. Something you can't see, something you can't readily do anything about, supposedly, without the massive infrastructure of modern government which supports the health system in one way or another, depending on what country you're in. It's either some form of nationalised service or it's some form of private business service where you get insurance and stuff like that. But creating that provision of healthcare availability to the general populace, you can't do that. Therefore, there has to be this big governance system that does that job for you. And there has been a few things in the media over the last week or 2 weeks that have made mention of this kind of unifying effect of a global singular enemy. The whole world is now affected by this thing. All the countries are working together. They're coming together metaphorically, in the virtual space to try and deal with this situation. There's been various articles that cover this kind of concept in one way or another, from things like them suggesting that there needs to be a globalized scientific collaboration to assess and deal with the virus and the consequences of it, etc. And then you've got the international trade elements of people bidding. They're in bidding wars for medical supplies, as well as other stuff like the protection equipment, masks and face shields, and also food supplies. I talked over the last few weeks a few times about how there is this lag effect that the globalized just-in-time system now is suffering from. So now we're starting to get the kind of effects where a lot of the international trade networks have suffered this 1 or 2 months worth of interruption. So, for example, the shipping containers are stuck in certain places around the globe, mainly in China, supposedly. But this is going to cause that lag effect. This is building up that lag. So even if they decide to suddenly go back to normal again and everybody's allowed out and all go back to work and everything's back, the way it used to be, allegedly, even if and when they do that, it's still going to take a certain amount of time for things to get back into a flow again if we still rely on that kind of just-in-time system. International globalized trade network, the web reaching around the world to ensnare all the little fishies. So, one world enemy, an invisible enemy that you can't put your hands on. You can't do like one meme I saw, some guy coughs into a paper bag and then attacks the paper bag. You can't kill the virus that way. So you can't really deal with it, which means you're left in this situation of relying on outside forces to deal with this problem for you, supposedly, allegedly. That's the way they present it. You're not able to do this, so you need us. So singular world enemy that cannot be seen by the average populace, cannot be dealt with by the average individual. Even an exceptional individual would find it difficult because of the equipment and everything else that you'd need. And even then, you might only be able to deal with it in a limited sense. Now, you require a governance system to enable that infrastructure of things like the healthcare system. And because it's a global threat, then that means it's justified to claim, loosely use that word justified, to claim that you need a globalized governance system. Even though we have all these individualistic nation states around the world, they all have to agree to work together so that we can deal with this problem, because it's a globalized pandemic. So it works really well for so many things. Yeah, you can't see it, you can't attack it, and the only way you can hopefully supposedly deal with it, I'm going to say supposedly and allegedly a lot tonight because of a lot of things that are going on in the internet world, which I will come back to as part of the other points. You can't deal with it, so you need these outside forces, these outside institutes and infrastructure. Suits the globalization agenda perfectly. And then you look at things like Agenda 21, and I will just sort out a screen share so I can show you the kind of thing I'm referencing, because I'm not going to go into great detail. Well, not much detail at all, really. It's a generalized point before I move on. This is just one of the main pages on the UN's own website about sustainability goals. And this is what the Agenda 21 document connects to. 17 goals listed. And the situation as it's playing out at the moment, and the so-called solutions that they are enacting to different degrees in different countries. Some are being much more stringent than here in the UK, but yeah, you know, they're still going over the top here in the UK. But a lot of the things that they're claiming justification to enact now serve the purpose of fulfilling these requirements of Agenda 21. No poverty. If there's not a lot of jobs and people are not allowed out to go to work or run their businesses, as has happened over the last few weeks, literally millions more people are now trying to connect to, here in the UK, it's what they call universal credit, but it's the equivalent of the UBI as it's been presented in other countries, the universal basic income. So if that's the situation as it's going to roll out, then an increasing number, an ever-growing demographic of your population is going to be in a situation of relying on that system of international governance, because the markets exist in a global connection to keep them out of poverty. But that poverty is being redefined on a global scale. I say many years ago, certainly several years ago, Oxfam released a study paper, a white paper, that showed they could solve the worst elements of global poverty, like the people that are in the severest levels of poverty, could be solved globally for approximately £3 billion, which, if you've got some comprehension of the general scale of global finances, it's not a lot of money in these modern times. Yeah, maybe 100 years ago, 3 billion would seem like an astounding amount of money to talk about, but now it's not. You know, Mark Zuckerberg probably made that much money in a month. So a lot of what's happening at the moment, think of things like the transference to that state benefit system, which creates a feedback loop that perpetuates the justification of the state itself, because they are sustained by the resource that are those wards of the state. At the same time, the majority of that financial infrastructure is being transferred to the digital realm. So when you apply for universal credit, most of the application takes place online, and it requires you to have an email address and an online presence where you can log into your page. You get a little number given to you, like a registration number, and you have to log in and put your number in, put your ID in and everything to see your page. And if based on your claim you're required to do things like job searches or join a job club kind of thing, that will be listed on there, and you have to tick them off as you do them and stuff like that. Otherwise you don't get your payment. All of that, plus now at the moment, the justification included on top of that is that cash is dirty because it carries the virus, even though modern UK cash is like plastic. You know, supposedly the virus can easily be cleaned off. So to claim that, it's dirty all of a sudden. Anyway, yeah, that's another side point that we could rant about for fucking hours. But demonizing cash so that more people are driven towards electronic commerce, electronic finances, which adds in again to that connection of you to the international global superstate that guarantees that there will be no poverty, because all of you that are unemployed for whatever reason, even if that's because you've been told to stay at home because of a pandemic, you all get given the same payments. So therefore, poverty has been reclassified. If you're getting that payment that is just enough to survive, then you're not poor, are you? So that's just one of those points addressed by this situation. There's only a couple on that list that are not really directly addressed by this current situation, as in the current situation is enabling them to push the world towards these particular goals, to use as a justification for them to enact policies and change the way society works so that it attains these supposed goals that they're after. You could work your way through that. You could do a series of presentations, working your way through those goals and correlating them to a lot of what's happening at the moment, and in particular, what is being put out into the media, the propaganda that's being put into the media to psychologically nudge people towards this new frame of mind that suits the Agenda 21. The modern smart city state, there's no better way to describe it. I've talked about this a few times over the years. I mentioned this many years ago. We are moving towards a globalized, singular, federal superstate. And on a smaller scale, on a lower level of that macro superstate, there will be city-states. So those smart, sustainable cities that are being introduced, and also including the introduction of things like 5G and automated systems, etc., a lot more of the commerce being moved into the digital sphere, so people aren't needed to move around as much, so there's more justification to keep you in your homes. On and on and on those connections go. The use of things like automated vehicles, so it removes again the human element, which means again you're more likely to be transferred into some other kind of employment that means you're not required to leave your home. You do a job online. You do something in the virtual space that warrants your financial earnings. So the one world enemy, to unify the globe in a, to use their own vernacular, in a modern war. This pandemic is being branded as a war. And the enemy is invisible. You can't put your hands on it. You can't fight it. The medical staff are now the frontline troops. And I've mentioned this, I think, last week and on Wednesday. A lot of the programming that is being pushed onto the public, the kind of psychological nudging that is being put onto them, the gaslighting that is being done en masse. MK Ultra never went away. They just moved it from attacking an individual to attacking people in groups and en masse. That is encouraging you to perceive that we are in a wartime situation and to treat this thing as if you are in a war. Therefore, you're more willing to acquiesce and accept things like quarantine and rationing. So you're more willing to stay at home. And when you're told, when you're instructed, when Pavlov rings his little bell, you come outside your front door, but you keep 6 feet apart. Keep your hands 6 feet apart, folks, because of social distancing. You come outside and you clap like a seal. Just like Pavlov trained his dogs to drool whenever he rang the bell that they thought meant they were going to get fed. You are being encouraged now to support the troops, just like they did in the War of Terror. Please note, I said the War of Terror, not the war against terror. This is the same kind of obedience training and virtue signaling mindset that they're putting the public into. Don't worry, the NHS troops are fighting the battle against the enemy. A whole squadron was sent in to shoot vaccines at the virus. You don't have to. You stay at home, you be a good little citizen and stay in your box and leave the fighting to those frontline troops. But make sure you support the troops, because otherwise you'll be a social pariah. Don't question the casualty rates. Don't question the origin of the alleged virus. Don't question the death toll that we keep telling you every day. Just accept it. Just take it on board as your new dogma that you then enforce onto other people, so that you self-police yourselves, but feel that you're doing a good thing because you're doing what the government told you to. You're staying at home and sitting on the sofa, and you're clapping like a seal when they tell you to. Sit down, shake my paw before you get a cookie. That is the same as how you train a dog. Please don't take this personally. I'm not attacking any individual. I'm talking about the general situation of what is happening at the moment in our societies. If you feel offended by the way I'm saying it, maybe that's because there's something in your own thinking that I've just affronted and made you question for yourself. I'm not against people showing their support for medical workers. That's been true always. Doesn't need to be suddenly the thing because there's a pandemic. You should have been supporting those people all along in the first place. And standing outside your front door, clapping for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. How do you think that suddenly makes it all okay and fixes the problem? It's the same as most religious delusions, where people think because they've paid their alms money, because they went and kissed the shrine, all of a sudden all the bad shit that they do is forgiven. They don't change the way they live. They just think like, oh, last month, I built up all this shit from all the sins that I've done, but I go and ask for my forgiveness. I get forgiven, and now I can start all over again. Fill up next month's sheet so that when I go back next month, I can be forgiven again. Before I get into a rant about religion, let's stop screen sharing that one. Get back to my notes and see where I got to. Right, the next main point is the next screen share. That's convenient timing. But as I say, please, this is a caveat I usually say every so often. Please don't take it personally. I'm not shouting at you individually. If I was, then I'd be saying your name. I'd be saying so-and-so is a whatever. This is talking about the general situation of how they are manipulating the public en masse, because people just want to get along. People want to have a nice life. People want to have a healthy, safe, comfortable, content living. And they want to be able to get on with their neighbors, not have, shit happening and drama and blah, blah, blah. So they do what they think is achieving that goal. Path of least resistance. And the system has learned the psychology of manipulating that general thought process in most people. It's like, would you prefer a cookie, or do you want a spanking? Which would you prefer? And path of least resistance to comfort and contentment and happiness. So you go for the comfort and contentment and happiness. And when they keep promising you that, but it's like a dangling carrot that they keep pulling along, you never quite get it. You never quite get to chew on that carrot, but they keep getting you along, go along, go along, go along. So a lot of what I've been doing recently is pointing at what's been happening in the media that correlates to things that we've been talking about on these shows. I say we because it's not just me, even though I do my hour or so monologue. It's not just me doing this stuff. There's a lot of people out here that are talking about these kind of questions or asking questions and talking about these kind of subjects. We've been discussing these things for a number of years, and now they're starting to emanate to such a degree that it would be succumbing to the catch-22 of not addressing them and just, oh, don't talk about that because it's too depressing. What's depressing is ignoring it, because as Orwell put it, ignorance is strength. It doesn't get you anything other than a strengthening of the collective bullshit. So to make the point that these things are now occurring, as we've been pointing out for multiple years, but in recent weeks and months, I've near enough predicted this stuff week after week as it's been about to happen. Number 10 seeks to end coronavirus lockdown with immunity passports. This is an article on The Guardian, and it's referencing Mr. Matt Hancock, in one of his recent presentations. This is from a few days ago, 2nd of April, and I think he gave that presentation on the 2nd of April. I'm glad he didn't do it on the 1st of April, because otherwise the denialists, the coincidence theorists, would have been claiming that it was just done as a practical joke and there was no reality to it. But it is already a reality when there are some places in the country, in the UK at the moment, where you cannot move around unless you have papers that give you permission to travel, that identify you as an essential worker or fulfilling an essential role. Therefore, you are allowed to move around. If you don't have those papers, as the police have been proving over the last week, even though most of what the government has implemented have been guidelines, the police have been acting as if they are legislation already existing in statute. So they have been arresting people. They have been fining people. Anyway, this particular article just points out some of the more important points that he says during his address when he was giving his daily presentation. And just to pick out the main points, because I think the headline really says it all. Some of this article is mainly just them explaining how one side is blaming the other side, basically. It's like, it's not our fault there's not enough testing going on. It's because they haven't done their job. And no, it's the politicians' fault, etc. Let me just find where it was. Looking at the possibility of issuing immunity certificates. His address on that day was mainly talking about the testing that they're supposed to have been doing, and that Bojo had made the guarantee that the government would increase the amount of tests being done so that they could identify and track people more accurately, those people who've supposedly got the virus, etc. The walrus, a cuckoo, a chew, are you the walrus? But he's still talking in ambiguities of when the test is available. In other words, they still don't have anything that can actually identify COVID-19. Then we'll be looking at the possibility of issuing immunity certificates, or in other words, passports. Internal passports. Papers, please. But you're not living in a police state. For those denialists that think this is just required because there is this pandemic outbreak, it's required that you are now in a police state. It's required that you are not allowed out, even if you never encounter anybody else while you go outside. If you go to the countryside and you're walking around and there's nobody else for miles around you, you're not supposed to be outside. It's required that you remain indoors. Why? Even if you accept their explanation of how the virus spreads and how it potentially can infect one person from another, blah, 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 you're not near anyone else. So how is it that you're supposedly at risk, risking yourself or risking anybody else if you're nowhere near anyone else? And that's just scratching the surface of some of the questions about their explanations of how the virus is spreading and what it is and where it come from, etc., etc. But really the main point is about how, as I've mentioned multiple times recently, they keep telegraphing the next stage. So in that particular address, as the article writes it up, he uses ambiguous language to say, we're considering these certificates to say that you're immune, either because you've had a vaccine when that becomes available, or you've already had it and shown that you've developed immunity to it because the antibodies are in your blood. I think part of the problem they're having is because of what the coronavirus is. COVID-19 is supposedly part of the coronavirus family, because there's not just one virus, it's got multiple branches to it. And if you've built up an immunity to it, is it immunity to COVID-19 in particular, or do you just have the antibodies in your blood from getting over the flu this winter? And was it just that they're registering in your system? And there's been plenty of evidence to show that they get a lot of false positives, that a lot of the deaths are being misattributed to dying of coronavirus when they can be shown not to have died of coronavirus. They died with coronavirus and probably died of some other complication. All these things are being deliberately messed with at the moment because it keeps the general populace in a state of confusion and chaos, absolutely, because ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos. They want to create a new world order. To do so, they're making use of a one world enemy, so the globe has to act as a unified body. The populace is being put into extreme fear and terrorized by the gaslighting, psychological manipulation, propaganda that they're being saturated with every single day. And on the basis of that, the public are demanding to be locked in their homes. And there are now hotlines that you can call to grass up your neighbours because he went into his garden twice the other day, or he's walking down the road when he's already walked the dog earlier today, or whatever. That is that self-policing, as Orwell put it, the double plus good dystopian environment where they don't need to have troops on every street corner because the people police each other. You will be socially ostracized, and or you will be reported to the authorities where more of your liberties will be taken away. That is a police state. So to mention the other bit off the back of this, I had in my notes as well, Passports to Pimlico. That's quite an interesting old film if you've never seen it. It's one of the old Ealing comedies. If you fancy something a bit light-hearted and different to a lot of what's going on at the moment, dig it out and give it a watch. But it has a kind of interesting undertone of talking about authority and the kind of situation like passports, internal passports. But yeah, if you want something in a bit of comedic, light-hearted stuff to watch, that's a good old British comedy to check out. Passport to Pimlico. But the other thing I was going to segue into, correlation does not necessarily equal causation. This is something that's popped up. It's been bubbling up recently because of the connection to 5G. And now over the last week to 2 weeks, I know there's been other stuff prior to this, but in the last couple of weeks, this has been really pushed to the front because now there are a lot more people talking about that situation and asking questions. And there are some celebrities that have been speaking out about things and getting slapped on the wrist because you're not supposed to question it. The authority says it's safe, so just shut up and get back to work. 5G doesn't cause coronavirus. And the problem is the confusion that's created by the deliberate stirring of the pot And this is where I get into the technosoma, or part of the technosoma, and why I put that in the title this week. Not so long ago, during last week, there were reports here in the UK that people had been burning down 5G masts, the antenna masts. They've somehow set light to them and burnt them down. There's quite a few questions you can ask about that situation. And a false flag doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with a military situation. Let's just point that out right from the start. A few of the questions are things like, well, are you certain it's a 5G mast and not just a standard self tower of some kind? How did they actually set fire to it to get it to combust completely in such a fashion? Are you sure that it's not some kind of fault within the technology itself that caused it to self-combust? And who did it? And that's really the biggest one, because this so conveniently suits the agenda of making people acquiesce and accept the rollout of 5G without any serious testing being done to it. And when I say serious, I mean not funded by the telecoms corporations themselves, and not deliberately ambiguous and misdirecting in its results. There's statistics, and then there's damned statistics. I can't remember who that quote was from. It might be Churchill, actually. But proposed or sponsored research doesn't prove fuck all, other than there are corporations and other entities in the world that are wealthy enough to pay off enough scientists to write shitty study papers and to falsify results just to serve an agenda. Big tobacco. That's been mentioned quite a few times in recent months as a correlating example to the situation we're facing at the moment with the telecommunications industry. The general populace does not need 5G. It does not need it. The telecommunications infrastructure that we have right now that goes up to 4G plus, 4G plus plus, double plus good, is more than capable for the general user, the general consumer of what the internet does. It's only if you're in some kind of commercial situation, professional situation, where you might desire higher bandwidth capability and things like that. For the general populace, it's not needed. But to serve a lot of those Agenda 21 goals, it is needed. It absolutely is, to enable the Internet of Things and the digitization of society, and to account for the sheer number of people that will now and into the future be earning a living by doing something online in the virtual space, working online in some fashion. So it absolutely is required for this new world order that they're trying to set up, that they're trying to birth. But a lot of those questions about the situation of why all of a sudden are people burning these towers down, allegedly, and the excuse that is straight away being presented and has been dripped into the media over the last few weeks is this conspiracy theory that 5G is connected to coronavirus. And as per usual, via the media and the spin doctors and the think tanks writing up how they're going to actually say it, and the BBC doing its usual kind of NLP manipulation of people's thinking, the public has been actively encouraged to view those questions as just crazy conspiracy theory, buy a wooden hat. Yeah, that's the level of stupidity that they're encouraging the people to use on each other. Don't look at the evidence that has been reported multiple times by different and independent research studies that show EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, EMF smog, has a biological and a psychological, a neurological, I should say, a biological and a neurological effect. at certain frequencies, at certain powers, that can be very damaging to the human system. The military itself has developed it to the point of deploying what are called LRADs, long-range acoustic devices, or active denial devices. These are now standard in the military. They're not like a prototype that they're playing with to see if they might be able to get it to work. No, it's been around for decades, to the point that it is now a standard that is provided for by many arms manufacturers. Almost all certainly the Western allies, most of the globe's major players have all got these devices in their military. And these are, the main one that they use is one that just about approaches the level of microwave intensity that it agitates your skin, and as multiple people that have been subjected to it during tests have reported, it makes you feel like your skin is burning. So they've taken the frequency and the power levels to just high enough to just agitate the skin enough that they know that people will just get out of that beam because it's just too uncomfortable, too painful, and it makes you terrified that you think you're going to be on fire. You know? So you get out of that beam. That's why it's an active denial device. So if that's standardized for military issue, and as I say, they've taken it to a point where they can use it as a denial thing. You know, it's non-lethal. It's used for riot control to just make crowds disperse. It is literally the same technology that is employed in the infrastructure that provides, or will be, because it's not everywhere yet, that provides that 5G level of telecoms coverage. And please, when I say that, that does not mean that the technology, that the beams, the frequencies coming out of those transmitters are set to that level like an active denial device. And more likely not. But that doesn't mean that they do not necessarily have the capability of being altered to do so. And this is the problem that the press is exploiting. There's a lot about the situation around 5G and its connection to biological damage that is so messed with, that it's been so deliberately polluted with bullshit, and a lot of that is put out by the system itself. And this is where in my notes I just got a little line that just says cheesy niblets. Because I was thinking how to remind myself of that kind of concept where they will deliberately put ideas, put conspiracy theories out there into the world, onto the internet in particular. You know, this modern age is done primarily via the internet. They will put ideas out there that are deliberately meant to misdirect or pollute any truth that is actually connected to that subject matter. So as I say, there's been more than 1,000 research study papers done that show a causation between EMF and biological changes and damage. Yeah, there's more than 500, I think, direct study papers that show damage from EMF effects. So this is not debatable science in that respect. These things have been studied now for 100 years, really, since the turn of the century and the beginning of the rolling out of the mass electric grid and the derailing of Tesla and his pursuit along certain scientific lines. You know, they curtailed that so that they could control it and monopolize it. So it's not a question of whether 5G or the EMF technology has the capability of doing that kind of thing. Yes, it does. But that does not necessarily mean causation. And because when you look into what is a virus, what are the current coronaviruses that are going round, isn't the coronavirus just the flu virus? How many deaths and how many people have symptoms of the flu on and on those kind of questions go in connection to, well, has it got something to do with 5G? Is the two connected? Is it caused by the EMF frequencies? And that's where the situation is still largely unknown, because they were not allowed the kind of studies that need to be done to show whether there is a direct causal connection. So we're left in a situation where for a lot of the populace, because they don't have maybe somewhat of an academic education, so that they don't ask the kind of critical questions or utilize that kind of trivium thinking of saying, well, hang on, correlation does not necessarily equal causation. And that is a logical mistake to make, to automatically say correlation equals causation. It doesn't. There are two separate definitions deliberately for a reason. Yeah, so that you can differentiate the two, because sometimes just because something correlates doesn't mean it's caused by what you're looking at. But because there is that ambiguity in the general populace knowledge base, when the media puts out a spin story of, oh, experts say crazy conspiracy theorists are promoting dangerous theory about 5G causing coronavirus, and then within a few days or a week, there are people going out and setting fire to cell phone towers. That's just a stamp. Yes, thank you very much. Move that across the decks. Now we just wait for the public reaction to demand that something is done about these crazy conspiracy theories that ask questions about 5G and the rollout of 5G. I do not think that 5G is directly connected to the COVID-19 outbreak, if that's even taking it on the premise that what I've been shown about the supposed COVID-19 is accurate. Because I don't know, I can see the stuff in the media and them saying scientists have found this thing they call COVID-19. But I can see a lot of other scientists also saying, well, what do you mean COVID-19? It's a coronavirus, and a virus is not an outside infection. It's something that your own body creates to deal with an infection or an internal biological problem, to get rid of pollutants. And in that respect, there is a good amount of evidence to show that EMF causes the same kind of symptoms. But no absolute proof that it's directly causally related, that one causes the other, and the only reason people are getting this supposed COVID-19 is because of 5G. At the same time, and I know I sort of mentioned this subject before in this connection, we talked about it a few months ago, I think now, or at least a couple of months ago. And I can remember Gary brought the map up. Hope you're doing all right, Gary, if you managed to get online and listen to the show. I think he still can't get a connection at the moment. So, but he called up a map that showed where 5G was being rolled out and where the current 5G was actually implemented. And then we compared that to a map of the alleged COVID-19 outbreaks. And the two do not directly, absolutely correlate. Yes, there were some similarities in certain areas, like certain outbreaks corresponded to areas that had 5G implemented. But then there was other areas that didn't. So if you really wanted to pursue that line of inquiry, you would need to get more evidence. You'd need to study it for longer and see if it is more than just a bit of correlation. I don't think there is, other than EMF smog can encourage your body's immune system to break down or to react to what it views as an invasive pathogen of some kind. So there's evidence to show that EMF effects can create a flu-like response within the body. So if the virus is the body's reaction to getting rid of pathogens, and that effect is what we experience as the flu symptoms, i.e. sore throat, runny nose, cough, shivers, etc. That's the process of your body healing itself by expunging the pollutant, the pathogen. then it could potentially be connected on the basis that it's making people more susceptible to illness. So during this winter, more people have succumbed to severe bouts of the flu because their immune system has been suppressed by the effects of the EMS smog. That's more the kind of possibility that I would veer to. And this is just my opinion. I'm speculating on this point. That's more what I would think would be the connection between EMS smog and what we're seeing as the kind of the outbreak, the pandemic outbreak. But I still haven't seen anything that could successfully show a direct causation between 5G and what they're calling COVID-19. Again, they use a lot of ambiguity, because just saying coronavirus is ambiguous. It just means flu symptoms, flu virus. It doesn't mean COVID-19. And the press has been deliberately doing this. They've been more than likely handed most of their output by other people, by agents, etc., serving the system. So the technosoma, to further on from that, creamy green, that's our queen, keeps us docile with her memories of war, and we'll meet again. It just struck me as being a Michael Jackson song, I'm afraid. But just to mention the Queen's address, let me find that picture so I can screen share it, because I thought this was just an interesting little element of her presentation. What do most people associate with a viral pandemic, or like it was in the Killing Joke video, that kind of pathogenic symbol? Can't quite see it on the screen there, but she's in green. It's almost like a kind of viral green, a bit like phlegm when you've got the flu and you hock up a loogie and it's got that kind of green, limey green tinge to it. And she seemed quite excited when she was giving her little talk, her little presentation. And I put that down to the excitement she felt at feeling like she was helping the people get through another wartime period of the UK. The UK is in another war, like I was ranting about earlier. The medical workers are the frontline troops against an invisible enemy. And she deliberately evokes that by mentioning "We'll Meet Again." Vera Lynn was the anthem certainly for Great Britain. It was the anthem of the Second World War, and in particular Victory Day. She deliberately plays on that, and she seems quite excited. She's quite animated and sprightly, and she's obviously had a fresh injection of simian vaccine or adrenochrome or whatever, baby blood, all that kind of usual silly accusation. It's just being sarcastic, but I thought it quite interesting that she's wearing the viral green as she talks about, wartime memories of giving an address to kids who were evacuated during the war. And it's like, what happened when you all had to go inside? Didn't you? I mentioned this the other night. Get inside, turn that light out, close your blinds. Don't look outside and see the sun shining. No, just look at your screen, see the death count, listen to them tell you how you've got to stay inside, otherwise you're going to kill people. They haven't quite said yet that you are going to be prosecuted for manslaughter if you go outside, without wearing a mask, or you're walking around without a good excuse or permission papers, etc., etc. But it'd only be one more step on the level that they've already taken it to. The public is already policing each other. Let me just check my notes. Where did I get to? Because I think I've rambled a fair bit. The other bit about the technosoma. I think part of the reason they've been pumping out, certainly here in the UK, I know it'll be different in different countries, but In the UK here, the propaganda has been a lot of the kind of social pressure, the fear of ostracization. In other words, if you don't go outside and clap for the NHS, you're obviously one of those antisocial, miserable, misanthropic people, or if you're caught out in the park on the wonderful sunny afternoon and the police come round and tell you to go home, you better be a good little citizen and do as you're told. Otherwise, the neighbours will be calling up the hotline to get you fined for being outside when you shouldn't be. There's this encouragement that they will jump on any infraction of the guidelines. And they are mostly, at the moment, still guidelines. There's obviously emergency powers in play, which gives them a lot more legislative power, but most of it is still guidelines. Yet the police have been jumping on situations quite overtly, kicking over barbecues, like we talked about the other week on Reality Chat, arresting people for being too close together, fining people for being in the wrong place without a good excuse. Why are they being so overt? Even some of the press has started to question, are the police being too overhanded because of their reaction? I think this is being done deliberately, again, to try and get the general mindset of the populace to acquiesce to this idea that if you break these new rules, even though they're only guidelines, they're getting the impression that they're rules because look at how the police are reacting. And at the same time, they're being fed this idea of, well, if you break the rules, people could die. So you better be a good citizen and stay inside to save all the old people. This is like in a gang situation where if one of the lesser gang members gets a bit too big for his boots, gets a bit uppity and thinks he's more than I am, wants to climb his way up the greasy pole in the hierarchy of the gang, then one of the enforcers will make an example of that person. They will give them a smackdown in front of the other gang members so that you respect the chain of command, you respect the hierarchical order. Don't step out of place. Do as you're told. So a lot of the populace is seeing this reaction of the police, and the police know they've got a bit of leeway to get away with this shit at the moment. So they're making a show of it deliberately so that those rebellious elements out there, or those people who are maybe closer to the edge of like, oh, actually, let's get out there and, do whatever, it's putting more pressure on them to do as they're told and follow the guidelines. It's basically they're making examples of people. They're not really throwing the book at them per se, but to a degree they are. And this is done to make a public show in front of everybody else. A more extreme example from the past was after 7/7, when they executed John Charles de Menezes by, over the top, emptying a clip into his head, basically, in the middle of a tube train. That was to make a demonstration to the rest of the public that you better do as you're told, because otherwise this shit could happen to you. It's not quite that extreme in this situation. They don't need to yet, unless more idiots go out doing things like attacking cell phone towers. The way to address the 5G problem is not by attacking the towers. That's not going to achieve the end goal of preventing 5G doing what it's doing, or by carrying out that kind of action. All you're doing is giving them the justification to crack down harder on people and to force the rollout of 5G. Because a lot of the general populace will turn their hate on you, as every good false flag is intended to do. They do it under the disguise of somebody else so that all your hatred goes on that other group. They burn down the towers, so you attack the conspiracy theorists for questioning 5G and the coronavirus. Move my notes again, one sec. Just get back to make sure I haven't missed anything. So the cheesy niblets thing, they are deliberately putting stories and ideas out there that is meant to entrap a certain amount of people. I know it's supposedly a misquote, but there's that classic quote, there's always a fool born every minute, there's always a sucker born every minute. They put bullshit stuff out there deliberately to try and sucker people into it, to propagate it online, so that then gives them the justification to turn around and go, look at these crazy folks online, folks. You need us to crack down on them, don't you? You need to agree that it's okay for us to ban people or remove their internet connection to give them an electronic ASBO, etc., etc. So even more so now, it's again, these recent events have so reminded me of what it was like during and just after 9/11. The state of mind of a lot of people in that kind of anxious, chaotic sense of they're on the edge of panic and they're not sure what's going on and they don't know whether to run or whether to hide under the desk or under the stairs or what. They don't know what's going on. And on that wave, of chaotic thinking, they implement various bits of legislation and changes in society so that your infrastructure works differently. That's a lot of how it feels at the moment. So even more so, you have to be able to look at information and not get emotionally hooked on it, such that you just jump on it in a biased fashion and don't question it, don't prod it and say, hang on, just how much evidence is there for this? Where's that evidence coming from? Applying a bit more critical thinking, basically, and don't just believe everything that you see posted online. Learn to be a bit more discerning. This is 2020, the age of the eye vision, the Horus vision, and I didn't even get to that point, which I said I promised I'd come back to, so I'll try and do it as quick as I can. Referencing that video from Killing Joke, I'm just going to share the screen. I'm not going to play the music again because it is a bit loud, but let me just find the main points that I wanted to point out. Right, you've got the song itself is called I Am the Virus. Oh, there you go. Didn't mute it. And in this, because it's a lyrics video, so it's mainly about the text on the screen, but the imagery that they've chosen for the video is just highly, highly appropriate, prescient to what's been happening recently. I haven't been able to pause it at a point where you can see it fully, but at many points in the video, there is this large revolving star-shaped symbol, which is the sun, also the virus, the corona, the crown, the circlet around the sun, etc., which all connects it to the coronavirus. And you have also images of EMF towers, cellular towers. That one's a bit of an array that looks like it could be an array like the HARP device, or maybe an XRAD. It's got multiple arrays, but in other clips, there's a 5G cell tower shown as part of the symbolism. But also, I wanted to point out a couple of other things. One was the upload date, which September the 11th, 2015. September the 11th, 9/11. But also, 2015 is the same year. I'm doing this off memory, but Peter thinks it was the same as well. I think hopefully our combined memory gets it right. 2015 was the year that Bill Gates did his notorious TED Talks presentation, where he talks about the population numbers and reducing them with vaccines. And I think he also put out information about we're not ready for a pandemic and stuff like that. But I'm vaguely remembering that. That needs a little bit of research to check up on. But yeah, September the 11th, 2015. And then the other main symbolism that sort of stood out to me is this little guy. It's like a mannequin. He looks almost a little bit like a ventriloquist dummy, but not with the articulation to have a hand up his butt to move his mouth or whatever. So it's a bit more like a mannequin. And that seems to have been a thing recently. Jeff C's caught this out at least a couple of times, of where the media is using, well, not just the media, because the hospitals are enacting this thing, where they've got a mannequin on a trolley and they're wheeling it in, rushing it into the hospital as if it's a corona victim. But you can see clearly it's a mannequin. This is beyond the level of a ridiculous expectation that the public will just believe whatever bullshit they're shown on the screen, because you can clearly see it's a mannequin. That's another bit of that kind of cheesy niblet technosoma. People are enjoying the thrill ride of being on the edge of death, as you know, constantly reminded that death count every day. Today it's this number, today it's this number. Like a fun fair ride. They're on the thrill, on the edge of death. But then they're perfectly safe, because they just turn away from the screen and they're back in their own home and everything's safe as long as they stay in their house and avoid everybody else. But anyway, back to the mannequin. Yeah, mannequin. And in his hand, he's got these busts that look a little bit like, they're meant to be important people. I haven't been able to quite make out if they're anyone in particular in the video, but, it's almost a little bit like the kind of bust you'd see in a museum, or maybe in a stately home, or in a royal palace. But the main thing that stood out to me is the other figurine he's holding in his other arm, which is a cat. And it's not exactly a Egyptian cat, but it's in that kind of pose. And the face is very similar to the kind of stylized feline face that the Egyptians used in their statuary. And when I thought about it, I thought, oh, cat, that's Bastet, isn't it? I need to change my screen share for a moment so I can show you a different screen. You'll see what I mean. Stop that screen share. Sorry, guys, I have nearly finished, I promise. I just want to mention this because I think it is very interesting. It could just be another example of the foreshadowing that they've been doing for years, but it stood out quite a lot to me. These kind of connections seem quite appropriate at the moment. All right. It's just the Wikipedia page for Bastet, because it's the quickest reference point to jump off from. But just to really make it stand out, the main point is Bastet is she's the sister of Horus, daughter of Ra and Isis. I've ranted a lot recently about the esoteric connections of the rebirth of the sun and the current solar cycle, and how we're going into a decline. So they're doing a lot of these things to try and bring back the sun, to rebirth the sun. But the main thing is, in Egyptian culture, according to the historians, the academics, Bastet was also depicted as the goddess of protection against contagious diseases and evil spirits. And that just, contagious diseases. And then, as I say, you go to the music video and you've got the imagery of the mannequin holding a figurine of Bastet, and the symbology of the rotating sun. It's going clockwise. That could be part of the relevance. But the multi-pointed sun. Yeah. It was one of them songs that I probably listened to at the time it came out, but it didn't really register with me in any major way, other than I thought, yeah, it's cool. I like what they're saying in the lyrics. I like the kind of music they're doing and stuff. But I certainly wasn't I'm not trying to say I was prophetic of they predicted everything that's happening during this situation. No. But it is somewhat uncanny, the connections that are there. Yeah. So if you own a cat, if you have a cat, if you are a cat custodian, because cats are the real owners, the humans that look after them are just their servants. So if you are a cat servant, it may be worth you asking your cat, saying what the hell's going on? all this craziness in the news at the moment they're subjecting us to. Can you protect me from it, please, with your divine connection to protect people from the pathogen? But yeah, the technosoma, just to conclude with that point, because that's the main thing that I wanted to rant about tonight. The one world enemy, they're bringing people to the kind of mindset that they're in a war, that you're on a war footing, that the war is being fought by the medical staff, and you play your part by doing as you're told, staying at home, social distancing, etc., etc. Go online, do all your stuff online, live in the virtual space. And while you're in that virtual space, you can get your technosoma, because the Queen will give you a calm, relaxing, reassuring message that we're all in it together as she sits there in her big palace. And Bojo's fighting the fight just like you. You know, he's now been hospitalized after recent rumors out there that, you know, questioning the fact that all these celebrities keep saying they got coronavirus, but none of them have been hospitalized. And then lo and behold, today they announced that Bojo's been in hospital. You know, how does a clown sleep? Answer: under observation in a hospital. Yeah. The technosoma doesn't necessarily have to be a chemical drug. You know, we release our own drugs, endorphins and dopamines, etc. And with the right cues, the right psychological cues to initiate that process, such as death count, death count, death count, be afraid, be a friend. Oh, it's something nice, gentle, make you feel better. Don't worry. Now you've survived the thrill ride. You didn't actually die. As long as you're a good little citizen, it'll all be okay. You need some toilet roll. Sorry, I'm being sarcastic, but hopefully you get the point. I hope that all made sense, because I know I was rambling a fair bit round. There's a lot that I was trying to
No,
fit in.
it was very good. You covered everything, or all the relevant stuff anyway. And yeah,
a lot of it.
Well, I was just going to say, it was like taking 3 steps forward for them, and they'll only take 1 step back.
Yeah. And like we were talking about just before we came on air, I know there's always the possibility that they will turn everything off and supposedly you'll be able to go back to how it used to be, blah, blah, blah. You know, you can go back out and go to work and whatever. But really, the reality is, the pragmatic reality of it is that it will never be the same as it was prior to this, because now they've got proof of concept, as in this technique works. Because look at how most of the nations have reacted when their government has told them this thing has arrived in your country. So they know it works. So they're not going to put that back on the shelf. Now they've got this new little toy, they'll use it again and again and again.
Yeah, and that's what people are, I think, not realizing. They think it is gonna, the vast majority anyway, will think it's all just gonna go back to what it was. And this is the, I think Taz put the quote in from Kissinger. I can't remember where it was now. I think it was in the chat earlier on that she put it in.
I forgot to grab that article. I meant to get that up as well. The big piece he did talking about the global order.
Yeah, I think it's at the top of the chat somewhere. Let me just see if I can dig
cool.
it.
Thanks, Taz, for putting that in. Because, you know, that seemed like very relevant timing at the moment, when now here in the UK they're talking about the passport thing, and him talking about the one world order kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, see if I can find it. It's up there somewhere.
But yeah, chat box won't update for some reason.
I did have it on my. I did load the link actually. It's in. Actually, it's in Skype. Let me just read it from Skype. It's so easy. It says, "Here we go." Okay. This was said on just now or this month, last 6 days. He's saying the reality of the world will never be the same after the coronavirus. To argue now about the past only makes it harder to do what has to be done. That's very, dark, and they know it's changed. They know it already has. I mean, as I said before, over the past few weeks of this lockdown and what we're going through, this is start of the, like I say, bringing it all back. Like I say, 3 steps forward, they're going quickly, and people think they're going to go back. No, they'll go 1 step back. They'll let you maybe go out a bit more, but that's to come. That's still down the road. That's still, months away yet. But in the meantime, do what they're doing at the moment, which is just keeping the lockdown going and keeping it forward, and then using the media as its arm to slap anybody or to put out the mind virus into people to make them, do as they're told. So
it's
yeah,
frustrating when you've been trying to warn people about this for a long time, and it's like watching the world's worst horror film in slow motion.
Yeah,
it is. It is.
And
I mean,
for me, what has been, I think maybe it's going to change a bit now because things are becoming so overt that a lot more people can see it, which means, maybe they're a bit more willing to give it consideration now. But just the simple reality that the easiest solution is stop using their bullshit. So if you don't want 5G to be implemented, don't buy a 5G phone. If your telecom supplier gets in touch and say, hey, we've got a new 5G service in your area, do you want to subscribe? You say, no, thank you, I ain't interested.
But what I'm thinking is, where's all the, and Dr. Rock mentioned it in the chat as well, where's all the regular counts of flu cases that happen every year? Are these being skewered with these counts? We're not getting any real evidence of anything. We're just being told by the media and by the government that this is how it is. And now Boris, apparently, they were saying tonight just before, he's in intensive care.
Yeah.
He's been taken to the intensive care unit.
I think he's doing a wee bit of crisis acting there, to be fair. It's quite easy to fool them. All he needs to do is ruffle his hair up a bit and take a couple of buttons down on his shirt, and that seems to be the evidence.
Like I say, we're not getting clarity of the, people are taking it all from, again, in the panic. The media are doing a great job of panicking everybody out, and there we go. There's some figures there.
I've heard reports of the same sort of deaths have been occurring at the same time for the last few years. There hasn't been this massive rise in the overall deaths. I've seen reports as well with the pneumonia, the rates of pneumonia deaths since January have plummeted as well. So it just seems to be anything that they can do to shoehorn the coronavirus, list as a cause of death. That's what they're going to do.
Even their own official spokesperson in Italy, I can't remember what his name was, a doctor or something. It was an official statement anyway. They said that something like 99% of their deaths were being attributed to coronavirus when it was some other reason. Well, the way he said it was they're quite generous in the way they ascribe death in their system, in their bureaucracy. So that made it convenient for coronavirus to just be put down for the cause of death, whereas the reality is it was probably something else, heart failure or something. It's not to say that the coronavirus isn't partly responsible because it was putting more pressure on their system and things like that, but it doesn't mean, again, correlation does not equal causation. It doesn't mean they died of coronavirus.
Do we have a functional test that's going to find it? And if these viruses live within us and are produced at a cellular level as a solvent or soap, are all the tests not therefore going to find some sort of coronavirus? They attribute it to?
So that's one thing that stood out to me. Some of the stuff I've looked at over the last week. I can't say I fully understand everything about it because I'm not a biologist or whatever, but there's just some of the experts talking about that kind of element of it being part of the body process anyway. So if they take a test, how can they actually identify the COVID-19? Because all that's going to show up on their tests is the fact that it's coronavirus. So therefore, anyone with the flu, they're going to say, yeah, you've got it.
Well, you'll have antibodies, won't you? Which they'll pick up on. But the virus thing, when they're saying the stuff about, I heard that this week, about people explaining that what you said before, viruses only exist or can't exist outside the body, whatever, and they can't be passed on. I was thinking, what about like herpes and those sorts of viruses? Are they called viruses? I mean, you pass sexual herpes onto each other, don't they? Things like that.
I think it is a virus, yeah.
So
Is
what
it
is?
a bacteria or a germ?
But it's been so muddied, the whole thing. It makes you think. I mean, I look at like think, okay, I get it. There's something out there, and yeah, as you say, there's the all the other associated deaths as well. This is just a new version of something which they've picked on and said, right, this is how many people are dying of this particular one this year, and really exaggerated that out to such a proportion. It's like crazy time, where each year you'll get, like we say, a large number of people will pass over. And I saw a thing which made me think, oh, that's what it's got like, just the image of a family at the funeral with the 91-year-old. It's a family tragedy, but they're making it like an international concern, and it's like the ages of people are very, very old, they're frail, they've got, like you say, more than 1 or 3 morbidity conditions, which is underlying health conditions. They've got more than one, and that's over 80% of them. So there are some people will be amongst the younger people, but the vast majority is all people who are old and have other issues. It seems that hasn't gone away, that figure and that study. And there's doctors there that will are not on the mainstream, or will be talking on other sites that will give you some more information that you won't get off some of the mainstream ones, because they, like I say, are making this they're making the pandemic, if you like, they're making it what it is.
It's a mind virus more than anything. I'm not deliberately avoiding talking about or questioning the origin of the virus, or if it's real, if it's made up, blah, blah, blah. I'm not avoiding that, but as far as I'm concerned, again, this is why it reminds me so much of like the time period around 9/11. It's not so much that argument that you really need to be looking at. Yes, those kind of questions need to be addressed, because if there is a chain towards somebody being culpable, in other words, did somebody make that in a lab and deliberately release it? If they did, then they're culpable of everything that's happened afterwards. But other than that, it's not going to change the situation of what's happening on the back of that justification. So to me, it's more important to question, what are they doing based on this justification? Not, is it real or not at all? Yes, there's deaths every year. The flu virus mutates constantly throughout the year, which is why you never really ever get rid of it, because it changes each year. So next year you get a sniffle again, because now you're getting used to this year's version of it. Which is why, we talked about this multiple times, why I talked against the concept of having a flu vaccine, because it's an impossibility. It's illogical. The flu changes every year. So you being vaccinated for 1 year's flu means you're still going to be susceptible to next year. So what are you going to do? Go back every year for another vaccine? What if they tell you that it's mutated within a month? You're going to go back every month for a vaccine. Do you see how this adds into the pharma agenda? And if you can't, then you need some help with your thinking. Anyway, sorry, ranting. But
you're right. I mean,
the point is, they could be testing now, and they could be labeling COVID-19 to what is this year's version of the flu. So if they hadn't called it COVID-19, all we'd be looking at is the stats for the flu this year, and people would be going, oh yeah, it's a bad flu season, isn't it? Yeah, there's a COVID-19. So they put they've created a label, and that label could be on the side of a completely empty box for all we know, but they've told us in that box is a new super weapon that you have to be scared of. The one question that I mean, this is Jeff C's video where he's showing that table with all the different death figures on. But one thing I haven't seen direct figures for, but I've heard people question, I thought that's a good idea to look at. I haven't had the time to research it to get the figures, but if, for example, you compare the total death rate for, let's say, like that period, January 1st to April 4th, 2020, the total national death rate for your country, and compare it to the same time period from last year, and see if there's any massive spike because of all these thousands and thousands of corona deaths. If there's no change in those figures, then that's an example. That's a bit of evidence that shows that what they're telling us is basically just the flu. They're just calling it a different name now.
it's sort of like conflation in a way. One of the tactics they're
Yeah.
using at the moment is ridicule. You know what I mean? To try and discourage people to find out what the truth is. Ridicule and conflation. You know, as you say, they're putting out articles saying that 5G spreads the coronavirus. You know what I mean? Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that the 5G spreads the coronavirus. You know what I mean? We're saying it's harmful. 5G is harmful, and the towers are getting thrown up just now under the camouflage of the fucking distraction this bullshit provides. You know what I mean?
They're being considered essential workers. It's an essential job, supposedly, even though, as I was arguing earlier, the general populace does not need the telecom system upgraded. We don't need 5G. I know there'll be a few people say, oh, you might not need it because you're an old fart that don't do fuck all online or whatever. Bullshit. You as a general end consumer will not physically be able to tell the difference between what you're looking at on the screen if it was 4G or 5G. It would be milliseconds. You wouldn't be able to register the difference.
But when you were speaking earlier about do we actually need it and how will it be sort of used by the public, you know, like I think short term you're looking at HD virtual reality gaming for 5G. And that's just, it isolates people, keeps people fucking further apart in a dream world than they already are, you know. And long term, for me, you're going to be connected to an artificial general intelligence hive mind that is connected through a neural lace network.
And it will know what you want before you even want it.
And additional to that, if you can see there's some robots out there today that can do brain surgery using 5G, right? That's a fucking fact of reality. Now, probably that's one of the hardest jobs that a human being can do, brain surgery, obviously. So that basically tells you there is no fucking job out there that these robots and that will not be able to do better than you. They'll be able to flip a burger faster than you. They'll be able to fucking play a saxophone better than you. You will not be able to think of a job that will not be fully automated out. You know what I mean? So human beings are going to have to change the way they define themselves. Most people say, my name's John and I'm a joiner. You know what I mean? So humanity's going to have to redefine itself. It's going through a fucking sleepwalking through its evolution. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it has. Watching the television as you know, as they go. You know, while they're watching TV, they're doing all of this stuff, and now people are realizing, you know, maybe this is the big moment where a lot will wake up, like they did with 9/11, and see exactly what people have been saying and probably what they've been thinking, but to maybe, you know, think, you know, but keeping it inside, and now they can see the wall built around them, and you know, this is the new future going ahead. You know,
and how easily it can be implemented, even though it's a non-physical wall.
Yeah.
And the universal basic income is probably going to get rolled out now because that's your cash fuck. You know what I mean? If it can
Well, Dirty Cash. I was thinking that song Dirty Cash. Is it? Money Talks. That song from the horrible song. Awful.
Well, if you got dirty cash, what you need is some toilet roll to wipe it down.
Another song that kind of says it all right now is Bullet in the Head by Rage Against the Machine. If you're not familiar with it, go and check it out and read the lyrics, man.
Yeah, a lot of people, like I say, been talking about things for a long, long time, isn't it? And certainly with the crashes we've had, the last one was 2008, the big crash. Remember, the banks all went, and the housing market and all the rest of it. And we're bailing out banks here in the UK as well, and still paying for it now. Well, apparently they said it was over, but yeah. And the other thing with Brexit, I was thinking as well, you know, we haven't ratified anything with Europe or anything like that. So whatever we're still roped into in that way, you know, we're still connected to them throughout all this going on at the moment.
And people are still coming into the country. People are still like immigrants, etc.
Yeah.
And just travellers coming from other parts of the world. They're still coming into the country. The borders haven't been shut down.
What you say, they now like comparing it to 9/11, how did they fucking bring the towers down? You know what I mean? They've got everybody arguing over that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe not the most important thing to know, like the actual we're not doctors or biologists and all that. You know what I mean? So whether it is a fucking virus, whatever's going on, but it's all about the societal change that's happening just now. You know what I mean? And it's particularly sad for me You see the various interest groups like the climate alarmists and the feminists trying to shoehorn this into their agenda. Greta Thunberg, apparently she fucking sneezed that hard the other day. George Soros' puppet strings fell off her. But it's just like we were saying earlier regarding Agenda 21 and that. It's, the invisible enemy is used as a global problem which requires a global solution. Your carbon footprint's your new original sin. You're a cancer on the earth. To avert the Great Flood, you must be tracked, vaccinated, and contributing your green taxes into the offer tray and contributing as it's handed around. Any alternative view is seen as psychosis and hate and heretical blasphemy. It's biblical, all this bullshit.
Yeah.
It's a big reason why they've been pushing the mental health stuff over the last few years. And now I don't exactly question it myself anymore, because to me, it's just like I saw enough for it to be plainly obvious. When several weeks ago, I was questioning or pointing out the fact that there seemed to be a lot more people reappearing on the internet, on YouTube, you know, names I hadn't seen for a long time. And all of a sudden, they're all coming out the woodwork again. And I question whether is this in preparation for something? And then lo and behold, we go into this situation. Yeah. So they knew that because they're asking a lot of the population to now do their lives online, that there will be more people asking questions, because as this situation progresses and it becomes more obvious to people that this isn't something that's going to last 6 weeks, 12 weeks. This is now going to be the way, you know, pretty much the way it's going to be going into the future. More people will be inclined to start asking questions or pushing back in the internet environment. So they needed their agents to basically, you know, go out and scout your area that you're assigned to and check who's there, see what they're up to, like, you know, keep an eye on the situation there. They were prepping for all this coming down the pipe because they knew it was coming.
Yeah.
That again should make you question, like, hang on, what do you mean they knew it was coming? How could they have known it was coming unless it was somehow created or enabled or, you know, put out there by them themselves, them, the they.
And
But
you were saying, nice to see the Queen there giving a little speech the other day to uplift and unite the country, wasn't it?
yeah,
In
in
these
a
difficult times for her in her fucking 775 room palace.
Mhm.
She's been having a hard time though. We're still waiting on her paying her fucking bedroom tax, right enough, you know.
Oh, yeah.
We're all in it together. She's
And-
had a difficult time with her social distancing. She's had to wipe her own arse for the first time since her coronation, even though there's plenty of obedient arse-licking peasants out there that would gladly do it for her. I mean, what did they need to see? Did they need to see? I mean, Prince Andrew could be fucking making love to the corpse of Jimmy Savile in the background there, broadcasting. They'd still be waving their Reunion Jack flags. Pathetic.
maybe that's what you meant by
Yeah.
we'll meet again.
And no sign of Philip. Obviously, he remember the famous quote about when he dies, he wants to
Come back as a virus.
yes, and reduce the population of the earth.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
her husband. So.
I know this might not necessarily sound like it's very optimistic. My glasses are just not sitting right for some reason. My face must be changing. I'm becoming trans face. But a lot of what's been going on is the radical change of the way we live in society. Yeah? And I know we've talked about this kind of point before, but I'm thinking from the point of view of, this is not doom and gloom. I know a lot of what I was ranting about might sound very pessimistic, very doomy, like, oh, it's going to be like this, it's going to be cracked down. But for me, that's because my attitude to this stuff is you've got to look what is happening in the face. You've got to look at what is happening. Being ignorant to it is not going to help, because in the long run, your ignorance just means it's going to eventually creep up to your door, so that when it does kick your door down, you're going to be so unprepared for it that you won't be able to cope with it. You won't be able to deal with it. Whereas if you see it for what it is, you can be more prepared for it. You can't fix a problem until you know there's a problem. Yeah, if your leg's broken and you walk around going, "Oh, it's a conspiracy that my leg keeps making me feel pain. What's going on?" But you're still walking on it because you think the pain is just a conspiracy theory. It's just coincidence that when I walk, I feel this pain. So no, your fucking leg's broke, mate. Look at the reality that your leg's broke. Until you see that, you can't fix your pain problem, can you?
Nah. It's always darkest before the dawn, but you've got to fucking wake up to see it, you know?
But the way I was going to say it in this respect to what we've been talking about tonight is, yeah, a lot of what's happened and what will be happening in the coming months is going to be a radical change to the way we used to live. We are not going back to how it used to be. Even if they release us out of quarantine and people go back to work, it's still not going to be the same as it used to be. So, in effect, as an analogy, it's similar to the grieving process. Your old way of living, that paradigm that you knew as your world, has died. It has. I'm sorry, but it has died. If you can't face that, deal with it, have a period of mourning, and then get on with shit.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
You can't bring it back to life. We can't go back to 1950 or whenever you think everything was perfect. We can't go back. So if you can approach this from the situation of like a bereavement sensation, emotion that you get from this, yeah, hold awake, celebrate the existence of the life of that thing, that entity that has passed on. Celebrate what you got good from it, yeah, the good things you got from it, and take that forward with you so we can build something good as we go forward.
Yeah, exactly. Because the system, I mean, the economy, as we said, the last few weeks is gone, or it's
sorry, mate, just the Economist cover. I meant to grab a screenshot of that as well. If you saw it, the guy with his dog on a lead, but then there's like a hand coming out the cloud with a lead onto the guy. That's the Economist cover, for fuck's sake. They're blatantly telling you are now under a dystopian Big Brother New World Order.
Yeah.
One of the hashtags and mantras of the morons that's going around at the moment is "together apart." It's sort of like what I've been saying for a while. I've called it fucking "alone together." You know what I mean? We're all sitting here staring into these black mirrors. You know what I mean? Like starved the actual human attention, man. You used to go around and see your fucking mates. You didn't even know if they were in. You didn't even phone them, man. You were around, shut the door. You go and sit with your pals, 10, 15 of you in a fucking living room or whatever. We're all, this is exactly where they want us to see this social distancing. Social distancing is exactly what they want, man. They want you fucking isolated, frightened and confused.
Yeah. And as little social contact outside as possible, it seems. And that's what they're, normalizing us to now, and then bringing that fine system. And I didn't share that. I'll share that on Wednesday, that article from The Sun saying about, the powers that they've got now and where they can enact if they wish, and fine you up to £1,000, throw you in jail, that sort of stuff.
Man, some worrying developments, man, to keep an eye on as well. The Philippines have got a shoot to kill policy for quarantine breakers. Ankle monitors have been ordered as part of the coronavirus crackdown in Kentucky, I believe. The new Labour leader, Keir Weird Stammer, or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
He was talking about going into talks to set up a national government, or governance, as it's more aptly known. That's your sham and illusion of democracy just swept to the side altogether, There's new apps coming up. I'll stick your links in the chat about a social distancing scoreboard and an app to warn if you're too close to a particular zone. I don't know if anybody's seen we had the Daleks out. Anybody see that? The Poles have put the fucking Daleks out, like, get it back in your house and all that.
Remain indoors or be exterminated.
Drones
flying around.
It's funny, man, you know what I mean? But it's fucking pathetic the way they've got people obediently controlled. Here in Spain, where I'm at, we've had the streets bleached and the fire engines have been fucking blaring their sirens and waving as if they're royalty, you know what I mean? All these peasants clapping them, man, at 7 o'clock. See this Clinton? It's like the 2 minutes hate in Big Brother. You know what I mean? It's like a public display of obedience and love for Big Brother, man.
Yeah, spot on.
So
I think I might have mentioned this the other week, but I think it's appropriate to put it out there now, just in case some entrepreneur out there can figure out a way to do it. It could potentially be a little business idea, because you could sell these things via the post. So, you know, you could remain indoors and do. But what we need is a hat that's got little laser measurement things on it, fitted on it, and it measures when things are closer than 6 feet. So you wear the hat when you go out, and if anybody gets more than 6 feet too close to you, it bleeps at them, and it sends a message to the police and says, "This guy's threatening my life. He's 5'9" away from me. I need help. Get the police." That's the level they're getting people into. I mean, I know there's a certain amount of reality to that, simply because you can see the evidence. You know, I know it's been spun by the press, and they're making a meal out of this. But it is true that people are getting to the stage where they've been put into so much anxiety. Their life has been pressured so much. They might have lost their job and all this other shit that's happening, that they're going to start attacking each other. They'll get to the breaking point and they'll start turning on each other. So there's already evidence of people like attacking each other while standing in queues and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's someone in the chat there, Wishfix, saying that some ex-police commissioner on LBC calling for people to be tasered or rubber bullets in the streets for breaking the rules. And I think she put a video on a channel. I don't know if that's, or the channel, he or she, I'm not sure, whichever or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of nonsense and craziness that's being discussed by, you know, the authorities, you know, in response to people breaking the current lockdown rules, you know.
LBC is that London broadcasting.
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's an app now. You can just get it and listen to it wherever you are in the world. But yeah, it's a mainly London-based talk radio station. Been going for about 30, 40 years or something. Commercial station. And yeah, they tend to have a few crazy people on there. I've listened occasionally in the past, but yeah. But it just goes to show, I say, the level of that they're pushing for, you know, people are you know, wanting it, you know, wanting people to obey the rules, and they'll think it'll go away and we can all go out again. And that's how the mind's virus is working on them and stuff. And, you know, and those who are going out are being slowly but surely they're clamping down more and more and more, as we see as it's gone on. And we said this a few weeks back, as it's moved forward. It's 3 weeks on Friday, which is Good Friday. We had the spring lockdown on the equinox. We're going to have the 3-week review on Good Friday, if you celebrate the religious stuff. And maybe we'll get the end. I was thinking the end of it will be the autumn equinox. Maybe they'll end it then. So we'll go through the summer solstice, you know, or obviously May as well, then Beltane. They'll have us, you know, be doing announcements then on those special days. I wonder if they're doing their super duper bank holiday switch, you know, with that, because that's what they were doing this year, weren't they? Something to do with the armed forces and all this, and they were moving the bank holiday in May to Friday. I think it's the first bank holiday. I'm not sure the second one, because there's 2 in that month in the UK. And they're moving one to the Friday or back to Friday or whatever. And that's for some armed forces big celebration to honor all that stuff, or something to do with D-Day or something. Yeah, the war. Something connected to the war anyway. But that I don't think no one's mentioned that. No one's said anything about that. Obviously, that would be a big event, bringing lots of people together, no doubt. And that was going to be happening in May. But I'm sure I've not seen anything about it. Read anything. I mean, they've cancelled almost everything else. I mean, they had the laugh of a virtual Grand National on Saturday to, you know, sort of give those people who wanted to, you know, bet, and they run on national telly this virtual race, you know, computer generated horse race.
I could have done that here. Get a couple of flies, tie some cotton around one of their legs, and we can have a fly race.
But that's where they're taking it. That's where that'll be the change. And I said this, I don't know if I mentioned it live, that the sales of virtual reality headsets will shoot through the roof now. They'll get everybody on virtual. Everybody will be looking into that technology because of the way the new world is going forward. Can't go out much. Can't go out much. Can't even go on holiday. Maybe, you know, I don't want to. The travel, the expensive things. People are not realizing how expensive things are going to become. Things that you used to take for granted, like cheap flights and easy travel and cheap fuel and all these things, they're all going to rocket in price, you know, because of this and
I
what's
remember
happening.
what's his name? Fuck. Oh, the Scottish guy, Alan Watt. He said, "You'll think you're on holiday and they'll have you digging a ditch." You know what I mean? But that's fucking virtual reality, you know.
That's right.
Or
Yeah, it's
it'll
right.
it'll be gamified, as in to get your social credit points. You know, you have to dig 10 feet out of that ditch, and every foot that you dig, you'll get a little ping come up going, "You just scored another level. You've gone up a level." You know, shit like that.
Augmented virtual reality. One of the saddest aspects of this for me has been the fucking just public and celebrities are starved their attention while this coronavirus gobbles up the headlines. You know what I mean? We've had them fucking singing Imagine for their mansions. You know what I mean? And posting their elk steak dinners and all the rest of it online. You know, the impromptu singing and guitar sessions. You know what I mean? It's all me. You know, they starve their attention, man. And can somebody please explain the latest Facebook challenge to me? Apparently, you've got to tag your friends and post a selfie of yourself. This, in some way, is going to stop people committing suicide. Man, it's fucking driving me to suicide with our imbecility. I'm sick of hearing these celebrities like James Corden bleating about their hardship for their mansions. Man, it's vile.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that he posted a video basically just whinging about how it's difficult to cope with isolation, and he lives in a fucking mansion with his own swimming pool. Like, mate, I want to slap you even more than they ever did before.
Yeah, that's the bubble people create around themselves, you know, and the bubble's bursting for them as well. All of them, they're all beginning to see, and some of them will have nothing either, or will be brought back out of what they was their bullshit reality into the real world that they want, you know, what they're trying to create and what they're sucking people back into, like a working poor sort of environment with just the real top 1% running everything and everybody else literally, you know, struggling with, you know, basic stuff. Like you say, holidays in Europe, it could be a distant dream, you know, just for those who can afford the £2,000 airfare across to France. You know, who know? You know what I mean? To discourage you from traveling, to discourage you, because look how clean the environment has become. You know, whack the fuel prices through the roof because it will discourage you from driving now in the future. Because look how clean, and you know that's what you're seeing. That's what you're seeing being programmed into people, and they're not realizing it's going to affect them too. They want to go out. We all want to go out. We all want to have a life, and that's what they've seen coming while they've been watching television and distracted by sports and all the other crap. You know, they've been doing all this and been preparing it all and looking at everybody and how they're reacting and saying, right, this is the time now, because the dumbing down effect over the past 2 generations seems to have had a really good effect. And off we go now with this next phase. And you're right, Cookie, it was 2015. Bill Gates put that video out about the virus. Yeah. And yeah, so they've been sort of pre-programming a lot of this, of preemptive programming, or whatever you call. You know, they're putting the idea there. I've talked about this for 9 years now. You know, this way that they will plant seeds along the way, and then it grows in you, and it's like it becomes reality. It's how they work the magic. That's the magic I talk about, how it works on you, the individual. It makes you believe and think something is real and something is, you know, but it isn't. It's not your thought. It's you being distracted. And everything, you know, is your true self is not thinking properly. It's not thinking at all. It's just taking everything externally and not realizing stuff. So that's how they've pulled it, and they've been doing it through the entertainment, through the sports. And it's interesting to see all the footballers panicking, all the managers, the Premier League beginning to implode on itself.
Taking a pay cut.
Yeah, the banks may call in the loans, because banks may, you know, do that going forward in the future. They might have none of this nonsense. It's all gone. Forget it. No more World Cups. No more Euros. Forget it, guys. Your football's dead.
I did mean to mention it earlier on that article about Hancock's daily spiel, their announcement, it talked about how they're going to carry on with Bojo's promise to do certain things, the testing and whatever. But in the article, they put a little like bullet point list of what these things are they're trying to achieve. And the second point on that list was the Premiership League footballers taking a pay cut in solidarity with the NHS.
Yeah.
And when I was looking at it, I was thinking, why just them as like celebrity sports people? Because there's a lot of other sports where people earn big dollar. I know the big football games, certainly in the UK and Europe, the football games, they earn a massive amount, yeah? But there's it's not saying that money is going to be given to the NHS. It's just that they're taking a pay cut. So is this more like a punishment? Are they punishing these sort of like celebrity sports people?
And these big clubs, yeah.
Could it be because in recent years, a lot more of those kind of professional sports people have been speaking out on one subject or another? They're not necessarily, you know, like we are sort of talking about subjects like we do, but they might have said something, you know, and this is like the system saying, get back in your box. Even though you're a big celebrity, you're still, you know, part of the system.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of original Rollerball, you know, the movie Rollerball. Because in that's part of the main storyline of the guy becomes so famous and so rich from playing the sport and being good at it that he starts saying things, you know, that make the system worried that he's going to basically rebel. Yes. So that the corporate system has to sort of squish him, you know, put him back in his place and say, no, you still belong to us. You may think you're big and famous, but we're still in charge.
Well, I know some of the. So I was just going to say, some of the clubs I know are owned by the bigger corporations, if you like, linked to banks, and they use these big Premier League clubs, some of them as cash cows. So when they then start taking the cash out, because they won't be giving it, you know, those clubs will collapse. They won't have anything, and that's what you'll see happen. I knew that would happen years ago when all this stuff was going on. I thought this is a way of bringing it down, because if there's a massive economic crash, which I knew was going to come at some point, a huge one, and we're in one right now. It's all happening, you know. This is going to be the domino effect. Like I say, not right now. It's like, you know, a few months down the line when all this stuff is beginning to, you know, have a massive, you know, the airlines ain't coming back and things like this. All things are going to be affected, in sport and travel, everything, like you said, Cookie, you were used to doing, and you used to, you know, let that go now. It's time to put the ball away. Let's stop chasing balls. And I know people slag off Jordan Maxwell, but I heard him say the other day, ages ago, this was, you know, only dogs and animals chase balls. Human beings are more than that. You know, we're adults. You know, we need to learn and grow and, you know, make this a good life and everything else. And they've got us chasing bloody balls like fucking animals. You know, like we're just daft. Really, we've been distracted so much. You know, it's nothing wrong with being fit and healthy, but it's how much they've taken it away into the extremities of it, and taken a mass of people with them, you know, the population, you know, with them, and keep them completely hypnotized by it, you know.
It's become a modern form of soma, a techno-soma.
Yeah, techno-soma,
you watch the game on TV and celebrate with your mates when your team wins and stuff like that.
There isn't actually anything wrong with the game, man. It's a physical chase. No, I mean, there's a lot to be admired with it. It's like John Milton said in Paradise Lost: deplore what is to be deplored, and then find out or enjoy the rest. You know what I mean? But it's just the obscene amount of money that's in football, man. It's just international fucking money laundering, gangster money. You know what I mean?
Well, FIFA we know is corrupt as fuck, and they always have been.
It's mercenaries, man. I mean, it's like watching Asda versus Tesco these days. You know what I mean?
It is.
Playing a lot of mercenaries.
I
You're saying about magic is spot on as well. Although what they're doing, a dark form of it, is probably more apt to call sorcery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as Pasio defines it, he says it's the art and science of influencing change. So if anybody's just apt to turn their nose up to hearing the word magic, you need to educate yourself a wee bit further on it, you know what I mean? And what Cookie was saying as well about self-policing, that's the only way they can implement it, man. They need the public to act as their own sheepdogs and build their own panopticon prison system, because the police haven't got the numbers to do it. So they're relying on you snitching on your fellow man and enforcing these laws and being controlled by fear.
Yeah, spot on. That's why, like, when I was trying to explain earlier, that's why they're going over the top when they're in recently, when they've been picking people up for walking in the wrong areas. They're deliberately making an example of them so it frightens more people into just going along with what they've been told.
Yeah.
And it adds into this as well, just to give this a quick mention, because we're already running over time a bit. Taz shared this link with me for the ID 4D. This came out in 2018. Just the very first line is really all I need to read. Like, digital identity and civil registration systems have the potential to transform development prospects and accelerate progress towards the sustainable development goals. Remember I showed you that page with the goals from the UN Agenda 21? This is another one of those ID projects that wants to give you a digital biometric ID. To save the world. She needs a smartphone. Look, she's obviously so desperate for a smartphone. Yeah. But yeah, thanks, Taz.
Yeah.
I know Taz has been sharing lots of links that I haven't been able to get to, but we will. We can look at a lot of them on Wednesday night as well. I just dropped that off there. Yeah. So thanks for digging up links for us, Taz.
Yeah, thanks, Taz, for all that. Yeah, it's good. Because I don't get the chance sometimes myself. So, cheers.
And thanks for being in the chat room. And thanks to everybody else for joining in the chat room. Well, I saw Wish Fix in there earlier. Hello. I don't know, new beings there. James, I see you sneaking in. James, the chat room ninja. Hello. I hope you're doing all right up in sunny Scotland. Let's see how far I can scroll the chat room back tonight. Benno, I know that's you, Nick. Dr. Rock, hello. I know I saw some other names in here earlier. I'm sure Big Alan was in earlier. And Lynn, hello. I thought I saw some others as well.
Steve's in. Steve,
hello, Steve.
Hello.
I'm sure I saw some others. So I'm sorry if I'm missing you out, but the chat room only ever scrolls back a certain amount now. It seems to run out of cache and doesn't allow me to see the whole lot. But thanks for joining us. Thanks for giving us your attention for approximately a couple of hours. Krishna, hello, mate. Hope you're well. And please don't get feared out. If you keep the consideration in mind that most of what the mainstream media is pumping out is deliberately meant to be scary, then maybe it might not hit you as hard. So you can have a bit more free thinking without that fear pollution that they want to stick in you to drag you down.
Mm-hmm.
So don't believe all the bullshit, but keep asking questions and keep using your brain, keep thinking, because they might eventually make that illegal. You never know. We're going to get there eventually, maybe. But we'll still keep talking about this stuff if we can.
Yeah.
And it seems didn't get any interruptions or anything tonight. So maybe the internet has started to cope with the new normal. And we're all getting just enough bandwidth to do what we do.
Cheers, Cookie. Thanks. And thanks to all in the chat as well. Cheers.
We'll be back again Wednesday night on the Reality Chat channel to talk about more news stories and etc. And Steve will be on Thursday night with a mystery show, playing some music and talking about things, not necessarily news stories and stuff, but maybe a bit more esoteric or just general conversation points rather than just being fixated on all the crap. Do take a break if you get stressed out by all this stuff. Don't think you have to be connected constantly to see it all, because they're going to just keep pumping out the same shit as we go. So don't subject yourself to saturation when it starts to stress you out. Take a break, go and do something. Do something you enjoy, as my official letter, I don't know where I put it, as my official government letter told me, do something you enjoy. So I'll do this. I enjoy doing this. So I'm doing something I enjoy, talking about how the government is fucking everything up. Okay. taking names and killing dragons. That's a good one. Hello in the chat room. When dealing, I can't remember the passage properly now. Speak carefully when dealing with dragons. Yeah, quoting Tolkien badly. But anyway, thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us. We will catch you again soon. Take care. Catchies. I'm going to click the button. I'm clicking the button.